All of a sudden someone leans out the rear window of the second vehicle and starts firing rounds from a rifle at his car. Police officers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment? Was doing a welfare check at a house for a suicidal male. Only person living at the house. Car and driveway, and house was locked up. Gathered some more info and was told where a key was. Opened the door, announced myself and starting searching the house expecting to find a dead body. Opened a closet door and the guy was hiding in there with a rifle next to him. If he wanted me dead I wouldn't be typing this. Dude was having some issues. Sat and talked for about half an hour. Told me he heard me but didn't want to talk to anyone. Got him the help he needed. I pulled up on a teen sleeping in a vehicle at the end of a country road. When I ran the license plate, I found out that he was reported as a runaway. The doors on the vehicle were locked, so I knocked on the window to wake him up. Once he woke up and realized what was going on, he shot himself in the mouth with a rifle he had hidden under his blanket. Rough way to start my shift. We were looking for a guy who stole guns from his ex and found him under a pile of clothes in a closet at a different house. Unfortunately there was like 7 kids sleeping in the same room, so I start getting them out of there while my partner cuffs the guy, who is pretending to sleep. We decide to drag him out and I go to move the mattress to get it out of the way, and we find the stolen guns under where the kids were sleeping. My husband has been a police officer for over 20 years. One night he was patrolling the downtown area when he noticed a purse someone had left behind. He opened the bag to check for it and found a turd. Some lady took a big dump in her handbag and left it behind. He'll talk about autopsies and burnt bodies, but that is the one story he would rather forget. A law prof in Australia spent 20 years as a cop before becoming a lawyer and eventually teaching. In explaining the battered wife syndrome defense to murder, he told a story of a call to a little old lady's house where she had said on the phone that she had killed her husband. Before this incident, he didn't really understand why it existed. Why doesn't the woman just leave? Why doesn't she just go to someone else's house? Prof shows up to the door and is greeted by a little old lady saying, "Come in, would you like some tea?" He goes in and she starts putting some cakes on a tray and pouring tea. He wonders if she's alone there. He asked, "So you said that you killed your husband on the phone. Would I be able to see him?" She directs him to the living room where the old man was on a lazy boy chair, bottle in hand, and a tomahawk in his skull. Meanwhile old lady is asking if he takes sugar or milk in his tea. The prof said at this moment he realized why the defense of battered wife existed. The drunk old guy had been beating her for years, controlled all the money and didn't let her have friends. She had nowhere to go, even if she left him. So on this day, after saying he was going to beat her if his sports team lost, she took matters into her own hands. He said this was the moment he realized that sometimes there are situations where life doesn't make sense and people take the only way they can see. This happened in August of last year. Was about 1 to 2 in the morning when a 911 hang-up call came in, where all that was heard was screaming and swearing. I was the closest unit, riding alone as my partner had been volunteered for another assignment that set of days. So when I got out into the area, I was initially waiting for backup. However, as I was walking up to the house, I heard several voices screaming. Rushing up to the house, the first thing I noticed was blood everywhere. The floor, the walls, the door, all covered to shoulder height. A distraught woman screamed and pointed me towards the living room. Once I get into the living room, I see a male and female on a couch, both covered in blood. The male had a massive laceration on his right forearm, and the female had taken a belt and snake wrapped it around his arm to try and stop the bleeding. Seeing how the belt was applied, I knew it wasn't doing anything to stop the blood flow, so I pulled out my tourniquet, and as I prepped it said to the guy, "This is gonna hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bleeding." I applied the tourniquet just above the top of his bicep, and knew it was on properly when he told me his hand had started to go numb. It was at that point I noticed a second deep gash on his tricep, that went down to the bone. It took EMS about 15 minutes to get to the house, and the paramedic made it abundantly clear that had I not applied the tourniquet, the male would have bled out long before they were able to get there. In the end, turns out the guy had come home drunk, and forgot his keys, climbed up to a second-story window and punched his way into the house, with near-deadly results. I'm not a cop, but my younger brother is on his first night out of field training, so the first night he's not riding with an instructor. Him and his equally new partner were heading back to the station at the end of the night around 2 AM. He's driving down a major street and there are two SUVs hauling the other direction. All of a sudden someone leans out the rear window of the second vehicle and starts firing rounds from a rifle at his car, heading opposite direction. Naturally they flip around and give chase, and call it out on the radio. He said it was either the fact that his partner was screaming his head off into the radio, or the fact that it was the two rookies getting shot at, but the entire city's police force came down on them in about 2 minutes. They ended up catching both vehicles. Turns out it was some sort of dispute at a bar between the occupants of the SUVs. Vehicle 2 was chasing Vehicle 1, saw the cops, who had no idea about any of it, coming the other way and decided to take it up a couple notches. A suicidal girl was dropped off at the hospital. Myself and my colleague were there, escorting another prisoner from custody. This girl came and spoke to our prisoner. They never talked before, but they were just making idle hospital waiting room chit-chat. The girl vanishes, not bothered. We don't know why she's there, who she is. We just assumed she'd gone somewhere else. After a while our prisoner says, "That girl has been in the toilet a long time. Perhaps she's having a big poo." We laugh and then realize it had been a while. So I start banging the door. No answer. Door locked. I unscrew the lock and she sat there, wheezing and not super responsive. My colleague goes for help and a nurse comes and unzips her jacket and she's made a ligature from a sock, and she's blue and not breathing. I managed to cut it off. It was on tight. We couldn't get scissors in to cut it, and she's taken through to get checked. Now breathing again, my partner goes with her. I'm stood by the door with my prisoner getting air. The whole thing is stressful. This happened in the middle of a busy A&E. ER for you Yanks. People are just looking at me. Next thing I know, a healthcare assistant is running out to me because this girl is now becoming violent and my partner needs help. I can't leave my prisoner and I can't leave my partner to get beat up. I chose to go for my partner. This girl is smashing her head into a wall, kicking, hitting and trying to bite. It took 3 of us to get her calm. I barely managed to get the assistant's shout out before going in. Radio signal is poor to non-existent. Luckily the prisoner sat patiently in the waiting room whilst we dealt with that. They weren't cuffed. They could have ran, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. On top of all the stress that day caused, I didn't really have the oh no moment until I was in my car on the way home, and I realized a girl nearly died 5 feet away from me. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the prisoner paying attention to where their new friend went. Does it count if it was my dad? Mum took me and my siblings to the doctor one day, turned off her cell as per doctor's office policy back then. Fast forward a few hours, we pull up to our house and there's a cop car waiting for us in the driveway. Not my dad's. Anyone with family in law enforcement knows having a cop at your door that isn't your loved one is something you never want to experience. Long story short, my dad's flashbang malfunctioned and detonated in his pocket during a call out. He was SWAT. Definitely an oh no moment for him and everyone in the back of that van. He very nearly bled out and they couldn't get a hold of my mom. She swears the whole department was in that waiting room when we got there, and my dad lived to tell the tale. Love him. As a rookie, I was responding to an alarm at a restaurant that was supposed to be haunted by a woman. The first officer that arrived was an older officer that didn't do much and didn't ever get excited on the radio. As soon as he arrived, he asked for a second unit in a high-pitched tone. As I pulled in, he had his shotgun out and he was leaned up over his hood. My first thought was, oh no, someone is breaking in. When I ran up to him and asked what up, all he said was as he pulled up and his lights hit the building, a woman jumped off the roof and disappeared. He was clearly shook. Me and another officer checked the building and found no evidence that someone had been there. It made an impression on me and I never went back to the restaurant at night without another officer. Not myself personally, but my father. I've heard this story hundreds of times over the years and this seems like the perfect time to share it. My father was a Miami-Dade County sheriff in the 80s. One of the first rookies pulled from the academy straight to Miami. All the time he tells me how police officers are all control freaks. His oh no moment was when he lost control. On his way home from a shift one day, he overheard a call on the radio about a convenience store robbery right near where he was. He radioed in and said he'd check it out as he was still in uniform. Still had shirt, pants and badge, but gun belt had been removed. As he searched the streets, he spotted a vehicle matching the description and proceeded to call it in and throw on his lights to pull them over. As he pulled them over, 2 kids got out and ran. The driver stayed behind, with no gun belt on. My father proceeded out of his cruiser and holstered his weapon in his waistband. He then took the driver out of their car and moved them to the hood of his. As he searched the driver over his hood, he said he felt a moment happen. The driver started to swing his arm around and proceeded to elbow my father in the face. He lost all control. Oh number. They wrestled to the ground where eventually my father's weapon was knocked loose. The driver proceeded to pick up the weapon and shot my father point blank in the lung with his own weapon. The driver escaped, but only for a brief period of time, and my father was blessed to have one of the top GSW doctors/surgeons in the country doing a seminar about 20 minutes away on the same day. He lives to tell the tale today, and I'm pretty sure the pose who shot him just got released last year. I was a rookie cop in a small town. I was driving to a check on a report of a large group of kids causing a disturbance at a school parking lot late at night. I realized I had not tested my PA speaker, which I planned on using to disperse the crowd. On my way to the call, slowly rolling down a residential street at 2 AM with my windows down, I decide to tap my PA mic a couple times to check it. First 2 taps, can't tell if it's working. I slow down. I tap the mic several more times. Definitely hear the loudspeakers that time. At that moment, I hear, "What the F are you doing?" I look out my passenger window and see this old dude sitting on his porch in his underwear, looking pissed. Our eyes locked. I realized I had no decent excuse for clicking my loudspeaker in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night, so I didn't say anything back to him and I floored it up the road. Definitely an oh no moment at the time. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Like and subscribe to become one of my ice cream sandwiches. Maybe even the favorite ice cream sandwich. Who knows? And not to forget, be nice to police officers, as they have a tough job and risk their lives on a daily basis.